And we are back one more time. The Horror Guys.
The Horror Guys with episode 218.
218.
That's a lot of movies.
It's over 1,500 movies we reviewed.
Wow.
I checked it the other day.
And all of them were really, really good.
No.
No?
No, they all weren't. Some were.
Some were good this week.
Some were, yeah. What do we got?
Well, we got Infinity Pool, that brand new Cronenberg movie. But not
Not
Cronenberg.
that Cronenberg.
It's the Cronenberg's son. He's into movies now. And then we'll look at a bait and switch, which was kind of a barely horror movie called Burial, but it was on Shudder.
It was certainly advertised as a horror movie.
It was advertised as horror, and it was on Shudder, but it wasn't really horror. Not really. And we try to avoid being cursed in Night of the Eagle. That's an old classic. And then we'll hang out in the haunted house with the Spookies.
And as a bonus over at horrorbulletin.com, we will look at two other oldies, one called Werewolf from 1995.
Boy, that's generic. I bet there's no other movies with that title.
And in case you forget you're watching, you hear like wolves howling in the back of every scene.
Ow!
It's got some of the worst sound I've ever heard in a movie. There's eagles, or they're like the hawk screech. Ah, quack! There's no birds in this movie. It's got
But you hear
wolves
'em.
howling in the background. Ow! And there's only one werewolf that shows up here and there.
Mm-hmm.
It was not good. Called 1995's Werewolf.
But you can read all about it.
And then in 1982, Lucio Fulci came up with another one called Manhattan Baby.
And that was an interesting one.
That
I
was
thought.
better, yeah.
Yeah, much more entertaining. He does good work. It's weird, but yeah.
It's weird. Yeah, it's not. I'm not going to say it's all good.
But weird works.
And something that is weird and good, the new book is out.
We got
The
a new
Horror
book?
Guy's Guide to the Films of The Horror Guy's Guide to the Horror Films of Peter Cushing is available now at all the usual places, including horrorguysshop.com, horrorguys.com/books, or brianshell.com/b/Cushing. It's one of our biggest, thickest books yet. These synopses are getting wordier all the time.
And he did a lot of books. I mean, a lot of movies.
He did. 50 horror movies, and the book also covers 8 of his other influential movies.
You know, he was in Star Wars.
You know, he was in Doctor Who.
He was.
He was in Star Wars?
He was.
Who knew?
He was a bad guy in slippers.
He was so good as a bad guy, they brought him back 25 years after he died.
Yeah, that's
to do it
amazing.
again.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and yeah, the Horror Guy's Guide to the Horror Films of Peter Cushing is available now on our website or wherever you buy regular paperbacks. There's a hardcover version as well. All the Horror Guy's Guides have hardcovers available. And you can also pick up the Horror Guy's Guide to the Halloween films at horrorguysshop.com for absolutely free.
Free.
It's free. Go check it out.
If you have any confusion on the order of the Halloween movies and which timeline goes with what, Brian explains it very well in there.
Some are good, some aren't, just like every other horror franchise.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, you don't have to sign up for a mailing list. You don't have to do anything. It doesn't cost a penny. If you want the ebook version, just go and get it. It's free.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so on to this week's movies. Yay!
Yay!
Infinity Pool from 2023.
Written and directed by Brandon Cronenberg. Stars Alexander Skarsgård, Mia Goth, and Cleopatra Coleman. Runtime is an hour and 57 minutes, and there's a trailer in the show notes.
Brandon Cronenberg, because his father didn't do all the body horror movies. He's got to go do his own kind.
Uh-huh.
I could do that.
Yeah.
I could do it better. And actually, in a lot of ways, he did. Cronenberg did Crimes of the Future just a few months back, and we really, really liked that.
Yeah, we did.
But it was a box office flop. This one,
Comparatively.
in my opinion, was not as good as that.
But it
But it was much more successful financially.
much more successful financially, so he'll be doing more movies, I bet.
I
'Cause
imagine he would.
the studios look at that sort of thing and say, hey, he makes money.
What was that other one he did that we watched last summer? Like the parallel...
Possession.
Possessor. Yeah, that was it.
Uncut. Yes.
I wasn't blown away with that one.
Oh,
You liked it a lot.
I liked that one. I need to
Yeah.
get that on DVD. I like that so much. I want to see it again and again. Yeah.
Spoiler free. What happens?
A lovely resort vacation goes far off the rails, there's a real science fiction element, yet it seems to be pretty much set in our world and time, which really gives it a surreal quality. It's violent, disturbing, and an all-around interesting watch.
Yeah, there's this one sci-fi element to it that the whole movie's really about. But the place it takes place in
It's just a resort.
kind of spoils it for me.
It's kind of a low-class country, generic. We don't. It's not a real country, a real place. It's imaginary, but it's imagine like a Southern American country that has this beautiful, walled-off, isolated, all-inclusive resort built there.
A very poor, very brutal third world country with
It's
a
two
very
worlds
elaborate
side by side. Yeah, it's all fenced
resort
in
that
and
people like in the middle
perfect
of it.
inside, but it's other than that,
I can't imagine
Yeah.
going to a place like that for vacation. That's just nasty.
That'd be strange. Well, the resort was beautiful. As long as you stay inside the fence, you're perfectly safe and in this perfect world.
Let's go check out the beaches in the Congo sometime. I hear that's a safe, fun place to go. Wow.
Yeah.
All right. Well, James and Em are on vacation at a tropical resort. Well, there's a local tradition where there's feasting and music, and the band wears really creepy masks as they play. I thought those were kind of neat.
They were.
She wants to eat at the Chinese place in town, and James mocks the whole idea.
And by town, we actually mean still within the resort. It's
We think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was because they have like a phony.
Yeah, they're not allowed out of town, actually.
Perfect town with all these and it's quite an elaborate Chinese restaurant that is quote in town, but it's really part of the resort.
Well, we see that one of the locals drives an ATV around the beach to scare the tourists. Apparently, the tourists are not popular in this area.
Mm-hmm.
Gabby approaches James and chats. "I loved your book," she says. She knows who he is. He's a somewhat successful author. He's had one big hit. And Gabby and her husband, Albin, invite them to dinner tonight at the Chinese restaurant that he was making fun of earlier.
The one he didn't want to go to.
Now he's suddenly interested in going there.
Yeah.
Well, the four have dinner at the fancy Chinese place, which is actually part of the huge fenced-in resort area. Albin is an architect and Gabby is an actress. She's made a career out of failing spectacularly and demonstrates that she can't cut bread with a knife. Whatever she tries to do, she fails at. It's a sort of a comedic gimmick. James has taken 6 years on his second book, and he's starting to think maybe it's a lack of talent. Em doesn't work because she's rich and supports James. Overall, though, they all seem pretty normal. Albin and Gina have invited them out for the afternoon. Em warns James about getting mugged. That happens around here a lot. Well, they get in a car and drive out of the resort, and we see the place has some serious-looking barbed wire around the walls. Is it a prison to keep them in, or a prison to keep people out?
Yeah, it does make you wonder.
Yeah.
But this is kind of it's a sneaky. They weren't supposed to be able to get this car. They
Tourists
fudge,
are not allowed out of the resort.
Yeah, they fudge around and manage to get this car and manage to bribe the people to let them out. So.
Well, they drive down the mountain to a private beach where everything goes pretty smoothly, and Gabby does something naughty to James. Wait, he's married. He can't do that.
Oh, he does.
We did.
They did.
After the sun sets, they all head back to the resort. James is the only one who's mostly sober, so he drives. The headlights go out for some reason, and he hits a man in the street. They all freak out, but Gabby says everyone should get back in the car and forget it ever happened. They do not want to get arrested in this country, so they all go home. And he was sober, wasn't he?
Mostly.
Yeah,
He was the most sober.
For
of
some
them.
reason, the lights just mysteriously went out at the wrong time.
Mm-hmm.
Back at the resort, the gates are closed and locked, and the guards say that guests are not allowed outside the border of the compound. After some persuasion, the guards do relent and let them back inside. The next morning, the police come for James and Em. They go to the police station and are separated. The inspector asks James to deny that they took a rental car out yesterday, because the guy renting it to them would get into legal trouble. He does deny it, but then he's accused of stealing a car and running over a man. Well, that's worse.
And he was killed. The man,
Yeah,
the
he
man
was.
killed. Yeah.
The inspector says Em has confirmed all this. Federal law says the family's eldest son will have the right to kill James in retaliation. The dead man had 2 sons. Wait, what?
Yeah.
You run over the guy and his sons get the right to kill you.
Uh-huh. But
Well,
there's a way out.
the inspector says that for a significant amount of money, they will supply a substitute for the execution. And we're thinking like they're going to go round up some poor person and blame him for it.
No, a literal substitute.
The substitute would be killed instead to satisfy the sentence. This is something they offer to support the tourist trade. Well, they take James to the ATM right then, and he gets cash. Well, there's more to it than simply replacing him for the execution. They're literally making a double of him. They make him stand in a room that fills with goo that gets all psychedelic and then does something to him. He wakes up with M as he recovers. They told me the double turned out correctly, she says. They go and look, and it looks exactly like him, and then it wakes up. M and James are required to go to the execution. So this whole thing, you'd think they were making these duplicate clones to execute as a sort of a secret. No, the real guilty guy's there watching. Everybody knows this.
Yeah, the family knows this. The son who's doing the actual killing, he knows.
Yeah. The whole double substitution thing is not a secret. It's just how the law works. The 9-year-old son of the dead man approaches James 2, who cries and begs for his life. So this guy is not just a zombie. He's
not a mindless clone.
Cries and complains and whines and begs.
To be James as much as James is.
Yeah, which is kind of the point of the movie.
Yeah.
The boy then stabs James 2 to death in front of the audience. James watches from the audience, mostly in shock as he watches himself die. Afterwards, they give James the ashes as a sort of souvenir. Oh, I went to the tropical resort and all I got is this box of my own ashes.
The ashes of my clone.
M wants to leave the country immediately, but James somehow has lost his passport. All right, well, anyway, we should probably stop there.
We should, because
this is probably only about 10 or 15 minutes in at this point.
Yeah, it moves quickly, and then it gets weirder from there.
Yeah, it does.
And more surreal. Yeah.
Well, the technology needed to duplicate a person like that is way out of reach for such a third world country. I mean, nobody can do that right now.
Right now, yeah,
Other than that, what a great place to vacation. Actually, this is my big gripe about the film. At no point is this a science fiction world. We don't see flying cars or spaceships or robots, just this duplicator thing. Just the duplication process as part of an ordinary world. It's a little hard to swallow on its own in this particular location.
It is strange, but, it's
if this thing
surreal.
Existed, the next Steve Jobs or one of those Elon Musk would buy it for his own personal use or something. Somebody would come in and give these guys billions and billions of dollars for this technology.
Mm-hmm.
Instead, they're using it to rip off tourists.
They seem to be the only ones that have it.
Yeah, it's just
very,
not
very weird and surreal.
Some suspense of disbelief is required.
Yeah, I bet.
All right, well, the gore here is excellent. There is a lot of interesting, weird imagery in the hallucination scenes, and the whole concept of am I real is ever present here. There's some doubt right from the beginning. Is he the real one or is he the copy?
And it gets more confused from there, too.
There's more than one copy, yes.
Yeah, there's copies and things.
Overall, it's a very uncomfortable movie, but it's also very good.
Yeah, I'd highly recommend it.
Yeah. And then we saw Burial from 2022, written and directed by Ben Parker. Stars Tom Felton from, Harry Potter, right?
Yeah, bad guy. He was Malfoy.
Harriet Walter and Charlotte Vega, hour and 35 minutes. Spoiler free. This was a werewolf movie on Shudder. Well, no, it's not.
Not really.
Someone misunderstood something somewhere, and this is actually a war movie thriller. The werewolves were a kind of German fighter during World War II. That's WERWLVES. There's no extra E. It's not a werewolf. It's a werewolf. I don't speak German. I can't say it right.
Uh-huh.
But still, it was a pretty good war movie and a decent action movie. And it does have some of the horror elements. So it's not way off base here. But it is not a werewolf movie.
But it was a mistake, I think. Yeah.
I think it was a mistake on their part. It was a mistake on our part to watch it. But we're reviewing it, so you don't have to. It wasn't bad. It was just not what we were expecting.
Yeah. I mean, if you like war movies, action movies, it's watchable.
Yeah, well, what happens?
Well, in London, 1991, we see that Gorbachev has resigned as president of the Soviet Union. Anna Marshall watches the news while her little dog barks outside.
Ruff, 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 ruff.
She lets him inside, and we see that there's someone out there Someone in a mask lets themselves in, and the dog keels over, apparently. Well, the lady sees the guy and tases him. He wakes up cuffed to the radiator, and he's not happy.
Seems like she's done this before.
She's not a helpless old lady. Yeah. She asks him why he broke into her house. He's a skinhead, and she's a Jew, so that might be the reason. I know who you are, he says. She's seen his ID, so she knows him about who he is now, too. I know you were a Soviet translator. I know what you found in Berlin, he says. He says that there's a story from the end of the war. A small group found something very, very secret, and they all got wiped out except for Anna. And he wants to know the truth.
So this is like 45 years after the end of World War II.
Mm-hmm. But he has hunted her down. She blows some kind of powder on him, and he starts to shake. She's drugged him, and then says, "I'll tell you my story."
Flashback.
Yep. Well, in 1945, when Berlin had fallen, the war wasn't quite over yet, and Anna was a Russian officer. Brana, who was young Anna, her real name, and two men have to take something important in a box to Moscow. It looks like a coffin, but we don't see what's inside.
What could it be? Zombies? Gold?
A
werewolf?
Every night on the road when it gets dark, they have to bury the box.
Okay, maybe a vampire.
Which kind of made us say, oh, it's a vampire. Well, no. Gregory thinks that's strange, but he's told not to think about it. Brana has nightmares at night since Berlin. Tor asks her why they bury it, and she says that way if someone kills them, the box will be lost forever.
If we can't have it, nobody will.
Yeah, so what's in the box? Well, in the morning, they dig it up and get back underway. They run into an ambush. It's a sniper, and the driver is killed. They get the sniper, who is a German werewolf.
There's no hair, claws, paws, or teeth involved in this kind of werewolf, though.
No, it's just a guy. And they will only need to camp this one final night and get on a train in the morning. So they bury the colonel next to the secret box. 4 of the men decide to go to the nearest town for some spoils of war. Brana follows after them and makes them return. And the men remaining with the box talk about real werewolves and make jokes. They're kind of getting paranoid because they're out in the woods. And Grigory and Yosef, is that?
Works for me.
Losef? Yosef?
No, I think it's an I. It's Yosef. It's like a Russian Joseph.
Oh, okay. They talk about Russians and their slogan, "Remember Death." Brana finds, pronounce that name for me.
Ilyasov.
And they end up physically fighting. Some of the men, they succumb to poison smoke, which is another one of the tactics of the werewolves, that they get these fungus and weird things from the woods and burn it and make hallucinogenic smoke. And one man wakes up and says it was a werewolf because he kind of hallucinates.
Yeah, we should probably stop there.
Yeah. So anyway, they're on a quest on their way to Moscow.
Take this box back to Moscow, yes.
Yeah, and there's great hardships and adventures along the way.
It could be something nasty in that box, too.
Mm-hmm. What is in the box?
Well, it would have saved a great deal of time if they'd mentioned what a werewolf was up front. And actually, I've copied from Wikipedia here. Werewolf, German for werewolf, was a Nazi plan which began development in 1944 to create a resistance force which would operate behind enemy lines as the Allies advanced through Germany, in parallel with the Wehrmacht fighting in front of the lines. So basically, resistance. It's widely misconstrued as having been intended to be a guerrilla force to harass Allied forces after the defeat of Germany, a misconception created by Joseph Goebbels through propaganda disseminated in the waning weeks of the war through his Radio Werewolf, which was not actually connected in any way with the military unit. All right, so, yeah.
There's no monsters. There's
no monsters here.
Yeah.
They don't mean that kind of werewolf. Still, it's advertised as horror, and it plays on Shudder, so yeah, someone made a mistake somewhere.
Yes, they did.
Well, by the time we figured that out, we were more than an hour into it and wanted to finish. Then they all decided to stand around and talk interminably.
There was a stretch there where it was very talky.
Very talky in the middle.
But the ending I liked the ending. I liked how they wrap things up.
It's a pretty decent war movie, and it's a pretty decent action movie. Other than having a head in a box, it's not a horror movie.
Not really.
No werewolves here.
Yeah.
We do a short this week?
We did. We saw one called Moonstruck that just came out this year.
It's a good one, too.
Oh, yeah. Directed by Alan Seawright, also written by him. Stars Shona Kay, Jonathan Decker, and Audrey Seawright. Runtime is 12 hours, 32 minutes.
Whoa, that's a long one.
That's a long one.
12 minutes.
Yeah. Totally worth it, though. Watch it at YouTube. We included the link. What happens?
Liz is asleep when a whole bunch of text messages start coming in, waking her up. Everyone's saying, "It's amazing! It's beautiful! It's fantastic! Don't look, they're all going crazy."
So there's mixed messages.
Yeah. Then there's a presidential alert. Do not look at the moon. There's a warning on the TV. She looks for her husband, Rod, who isn't in bed where he should be. What is going on?
Yeah, and it's like the national alert. Yeah. So it's serious. Yeah.
Well, that was an intense video.
It was.
I really like the lighting in this one. Everything is lit by moonlight and shows up as a dark blue.
Yeah, and it's super bright moonlight.
It's unusually bright moonlight.
Yeah, something's wrong with the moon. Yeah.
The music is really good as well, very ominous, and several steps above the vast majority of indie short films. So many short films get the music bad. Cheap music is cheap, and it sounds that way. This is not good. This is not cheap music.
It was good.
Yeah. The special effects with Rod are maybe a little overblown.
Oh, I didn't think they were. That was awesome.
Like, whoa.
His eyes were just the coolest.
But they definitely get the point across. You have to wonder what the next step is for the people of Earth. We don't get any real explanation for any of this, but it's so well done that it's completely forgivable.
Yeah, like the
definitely worth seeing.
Uh-huh.
Probably one of the top of the year so far.
Yeah, way up there. Yeah.
And then we got a classic, Night of the Eagle from 1962, also known as
Burn, Witch, Burn.
Yes. Directed by Sidney Hayers, written by Fritz Lieber Jr., Charles Beaumont, and Richard Matheson. Stars Peter Wingard, Janet Blair, Margaret Johnson, hour and a half. Spoiler free, what happens?
There's witchery afoot, or is there? We wonder at first if it's real magic or coincidence, but it becomes clearer what's happening as it goes along. It's very well acted, has an interesting script, and we were entertained.
We were. Yeah, and this is an old one. A lot of people, this shows up on a lot of old classic lists and stuff, and neither of us had seen this.
Oh, I had.
Oh, you did?
When I was a teeny small boy, I saw this long, long ago. I barely remembered it. But as it was going along, it's like, oh, yeah, they're going to find her. Yeah, she's going to be at the beach. And, yeah, there were things that I remembered as was going along. And
I was expecting this to be one of those killer animal movies, like the killer shrews or the giant tarantulas. Or, it's the eagle. It's coming for us.
Well, not quite like that. No, it's witchery.
You want to read this one or should I?
What happened? Oh, you should read this one.
We open on Hempnell Medical College. Norman Taylor writes, "I do not believe on the chalkboard. This is how you stop all supernatural things." Yeah, you see a monster coming at you, just say, "I don't believe."
I don't believe in you.
He's giving a lecture on superstitions and religion. He clearly doesn't believe any of it. Margaret is the teacher's pet, and Bill is the lazy student. Bill says Margaret is infatuated with her much older professor. She's not wrong. Yeah. He's not wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Harvey, another teacher, asks Norman if he and his wife Tansy are up for bridge tonight. Harvey's wife is jealous of Tansy and Norman, the new professors in town. Norman might be promoted above Harvey, who's been there forever. At home, Tansy complains about the jealous wives of Norman's colleagues. She says she'd rather be in Jamaica. Oh, well, yeah, who wouldn't?
Yeah.
Norman laughs at the Jamaican religions, which Tansy doesn't appreciate.
She takes them seriously.
Tansy's not from Haiti. But apparently she read a lot while she was there.
Hung out there a lot.
Well, they all play bridge. A game that appears to have no excitement whatsoever.
It's
I've never played bridge.
It's a
Have
very
you?
tame-looking evening. No, I haven't. No.
Yeah, it's really boring looking.
Well, I don't know about boring, but it's tame.
It's
Yeah,
very tame.
Yeah, it's a tame evening at card tables. Yeah.
Then they all break for coffee. That's the high point of the night. Is their
There
coffee.
you go. Coffee and snacks.
Harold asks how Norman is such a gifted professor. Have you sold your soul to the devil? Tansy flinches when she hears that. Oh, well, maybe somebody did.
Yeah.
After the party, Tansy looks very upset as there's something she's looking for but seems to have lost. Norman goes upstairs, opens his dresser, and finds a jar with a dead spider in it. She says it's a souvenir from their trip to Jamaica. It's a good luck charm and why he's so successful. After he goes to bed, she finds another spider and burns it in the ashtray. The following day, Norman looks around for other souvenirs from Jamaica and finds several. It looks like Norman's wife is a witch.
It looks that way.
Tansy comes home and finds all her spell things spread out on the table. She admits that she's been doing witchcraft. She was doing spells to try to change the future. He is simply flabbergasted that his American wife believes such utter rubbish. She's been protecting them both from the petty jealousy of the local people. It all started 2 years ago in Jamaica when Norman was dying after that terrible accident.
So she's a witch, but she's a good witch,
Maybe.
she says.
Well, the two argue about the whole situation. He demands that she stop what he considers nonsense, but she is terrified that bad things will happen to Norman if she doesn't protect them. Norman gets his way, and they burn all her charms. He accidentally throws in a picture of himself, and she totally loses it. No, not that.
No.
Long after, a strange woman calls Norman. It's a woman who says, Norman, I need you.
And more. Yeah,
there's
she's
more.
She's very lustful toward him.
Well, at school Monday, Bill confronts Norman for picking on him. Jeff thinks Norman wants Margaret for himself, but Norman seems surprised by the idea. Jeff asks about how Margaret behaved Saturday, and something clicks in Norman's head about that phone call. The dean comes in, and he says that Margaret has accused Norman of violating her. Margaret is Flora's ward. Flora is one of Norman's colleagues. Margaret then says Norman raped her Saturday night, but we know he was home with Tansy. She admits that it was her who called him on the phone. Something came over me. I hate you. A little late, Bill comes in with a gun pointed at Norman. Norman tells him that Margaret recounted the story and then slaps him silly. Slap, slap, slap.
Slap, slap.
Yeah, I'll spread the truth about you. You won't be able to get out of it. Suddenly, Norman remembers Tansy and her protections. Could she have been right? Norman gets home and finds that someone has sent him a tape of one of his lectures. Tansy tells him not to play it, but he does. Why wouldn't you play it?
Why wouldn't you?
Yeah. It does make a strange sound, and she's terrified of the noise it makes. She turns it off, and the phone rings, and the same sound is playing from the phone. That night, Tansy does a ritual. Let me die in his place. Then she leaves him a recording that she's leaving him. I've gone away, so this terrible curse can no longer touch you. By midnight, this will all be over. Okay, overreact much?
Or so she thinks.
Yeah. Well, Fiona comes over and says she saw Tansy heading for their country home. He zooms there, but traffic is heavy. He catches up to her bus, but then runs off the road and wrecks the car. And there's more to it than just traffic there. It seems like somebody has control of something.
Mm-hmm. Witchery is afoot.
By the time Norman gets to the country home, it's getting late. He runs all over the place but can't find her. He finds one of her black magic books, and inside is a message that says the ritual must be performed in the House of the Dead, or the Place of the Dead. He runs to the old nearby cemetery and breaks into the mausoleum. She's not there. She's on the beach, walking into the ocean to commit suicide. Norman pulls out some candles and does his own ritual. Something moves behind him in the darkness. It's a very wet Tansy. He brought her back.
Mm-hmm.
Norman takes Tansy to the doctor, but she orders him to tell the doctor nothing about what happened. Take me home. She's not dead, but she's clearly in shock or something.
So she's There's seems to be external witchery forces. Somebody else is out there conspiring against them.
Well, that's what she said all along.
Yeah.
But we haven't seen any evidence of that.
But it's starting to come together.
In the middle of the night, Tansy goes to the kitchen and pulls out a big knife. She comes back to the bedroom and tries to stab Norman. He notices her limping strangely. She didn't injure her foot. Why is she limping?
Yeah.
We immediately cut to a pair of hands holding a voodoo doll. Norman stops the attack, and the hands drop the doll. Norman storms over to the college where he goes through Fiona's things. He remembers that she walks with a limp the same way Tansy had earlier. She comes into the office, and he confronts her. He pulls out the audio recordings of his lecture, and that strange sound plays again. Fiona makes a face and then turns it off.
And that was kind of amusing, too, because she's got a whole bunch of witchery stuff spread out on her desk, where she's, in the midst of a spell, and he comes busting in the room, and she kind of, casually
sweeps it right off.
Kind of discreetly sweeps it off into the drawer in front of her. Yes, it's going to help you.
Well, Norman still plays the whole thing off as some kind of hypnosis, but Fiona denies that. She was afraid of someone younger taking her place at the school. Fiona insists that, yes, it's real witchcraft. She builds a house of cards on the table and then sets it on fire. Back at home, Norman's cat starts a fire in the living room. Do you really believe your home is burning, Norman? Do you believe it? Well, Norman says she's raving mad and runs out. As he leaves, she turns on the audio tape back on, this time into the school's PA system. As Norman runs to the car, he becomes terrified of the giant stone eagles. What? There's eagles in this after all.
There are.
Placed everywhere on the campus. He sees one of them come to life, and it attacks him. Tansy wakes up and finds out that she's locked inside a burning house. The eagle bursts in through the door and chases Norman down the halls of the school. It chases him into his classroom, where "I do not believe" is still written on the chalkboard. He hides in terror as the screaming bird approaches. Of course, he bumps his head against the board, and when he leaves, it says, "I believe."
Yeah, he waved
I
off
do
the
believe.
knot. I do believe.
Lindsay enters Fiona's office and switches the tape from the PA to the room. Fiona looks terrified now and switches it off. As Norman leaves the school, he notices the big doors are wholly intact. There's no damage. The stone eagle is right where it always was. It never happened. He gets home and finds Tansy out in the yard with many firemen. She's okay, but the house is destroyed. Lindsay tells Fiona that the dean has decided to give the promotion to Norman, but Fiona says he'll change his mind. But then the colossal stone eagle falls on top of her as they leave the building, crushing her to death.
Karma.
Yeah.
Came back to squish her.
Statue crush.
Yeah.
Okay, well, the first choice for the role of Norman was for Peter Cushing, but he was too ill to attend filming, so they got Peter Wingard instead.
And he was good.
I thought he was fine, yeah. It moves fast and stays interesting. There are a lot of is it real or coincidence kind of bad things that happen to Norman once the magic's charms are destroyed. Eventually, of course, we learn that there is real magic involved, but we don't know about the second witch until very late in the story. Yeah, a whole lot of, is she crazy or is it real?
Mm-hmm. Is the witchery real?
It was real.
Are there dark forces conspiring against them?
There could be.
There could be.
What's next?
Spookies from 1986, which was directed by Jeannie Joseph, Thomas Duran, and Brendan Faulconer. Written by Anne Burgund, Thomas Duran, and Frank M. Farrell. Stars Felix Ward, Maria Pachucas, and Dan Scott, and a whole lot of animatronic puppets and things. And the runtime is 1 hour and 25 minutes. There's a trailer on YouTube.
We watched, I don't remember which one it was. It was one of those documentaries that we did a review of, where they interviewed a whole bunch of horror stars. And the director, or the producer, or somebody from this film really tore it up for like 20 minutes. All these terrible things went wrong with it. They went through all these directors and all these writers, and one thing after another just kept going wrong, piecing things together out of different movies. I didn't think it was that bad.
I didn't think it was that bad, but it wasn't great.
Spoiler free. Well, there wasn't much of a story, And the acting is kind of awful, actually. But the creature effects are pretty awesome, really. And this is worth seeing for the creatures alone.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah.
Other than that, it's kind of the same old haunted house film you've seen 1,000 times before. Well, what happens?
Do we have to give a detailed synopsis? I feel like you just did.
They go to a haunted house and there's monsters.
And
yes.
there's lots of monsters. Well, we open on a small graveyard. We focus on one grave that's chained shut and pulsing. Elsewhere, an old man talks to a coffin saying, "We'll soon be together for all time," ominously. He opens the coffin, and there's a perfectly preserved, much younger woman. He's kind of old and ugly. Meanwhile, Billy walks through the forest with a bag on a stick so he can see that he's a runaway. Some kind of fanged ghoul watches him through the trees. A drifter talks to Billy in the woods about his parents missing his 13th birthday. As Billy walks away, the ghoul kills the man. Two cars drive down the road after a party, and they're lost. The ghoul drops a log in the middle of the road, so they have to stop and move it. Duke and Peter argue with each other to show us how bad of an actor they are. They weren't strong.
They were
actors.
both terrible.
They were not strong actors, yeah. Billy goes into the old mansion next to the cemetery, and there's a whole birthday party set up for him inside. Inside, a dwarf in a Jawa cloak sneaks inside. No, it's just a little ghoul kid. It did look a lot like a Jawa, though.
Beep, beep, beep.
Yeah. He opens a big gift box and finds the man's head, who says, "Happy birthday, Billy." Billy runs away. Duke, Peter, and their friends arrive outside the same house and the graveyard. The old man with the coffin watches them from upstairs. "Welcome, fools," he says.
At this point, I wonder, was he talking to the people outside or was he talking to us for watching this?
Yeah, and it was his head in the box still. So, Peter runs from the ghoul from earlier, who has a hook for a hand. The ghoul catches Billy, claws him a few times, and then buries him alive in an open grave before returning to the big house. No more Billy. Inside, with Duke and the gang, it's a really boring party with only one annoying puppet. He's got a hand puppet. One of the guys does. Carol and Duke find a weird occult figure in a box. Duke opens a closet. There's an old skeleton in there. And the dead man has a sort of Ouija board on his arm. And the occult figure will work as a pointer. So, they're just going to...
Don't do it.
But, they're just going to hang out with this old skeleton and...
Oh, yeah, because that's perfectly normal, finding a skeleton in the closet.
Yeah. Well, Carol knows all about these things. It's for communication with the dead. So the group asks the Ouija board questions, and the old man upstairs sends the answers back. It says none of them will leave this house alive. Carol then shrivels into a fanged demon right in front of the group. Lewis runs into the cemetery and is promptly swallowed by a grave. The whole group goes outside, sees all manner of creepy things in the graveyard, and quickly goes back inside. Yeah, they noped right out of there. Well, they all decide the smartest course of action, of course, is to break into small groups.
Oh, it's a rule, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's monsters. Oh, let's split up. Yeah, Isabella, the woman in the coffin, wakes up and calls the old man Creon. Except she doesn't want him anywhere near her. She wants to die. "I poisoned myself once. I'll find a way to do it again," she warns.
Happy marriage.
Yeah. He's obsessed, and she wants away from him. Duke and Linda wind up in the basement, which is suddenly full of farting mud monsters that rise out of the ground and slowly chase them around.
These are really cool costumes, these mud guys. They're kind of like, I don't know, what would you call them? Chocolate blobs.
Poop demons. Poop gargoyles.
But then they got them constantly making fart noises.
Well, I think maybe that's why they were made out of sewage, I think. It's supposed to be,
Sewage doesn't fart.
Sewage gargoyles. Sewage golems.
Okay. Very, very poorly done comic relief, I guess.
Anyway, they're farting. Linda opens up a wine barrel, which melts the three creatures. So, problem solved. No more farting. Rich runs into the Carol demon and the Ouija board. Linda and Duke argue. David and Adrienne just hang out together as the ghoul creeps around outside their room. Peter and Megan find a body in the attic.
Sounds like things are getting kind of slow and spinning their wheels at this point.
A little bit, yeah. Cleon he conjures up some helpers who will make short work of Dave, but Adrienne gets in the way. Cleon talks to Isabel about their many children. Corda, the little guy in the Jawa outfit, walks in. Isabella runs off, gets lost in the tunnels. Adrienne runs into a dollar store version of Man-Thing, who melts her into a puddle.
Whoever knows fear shall burn.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, she knowed fear.
Yeah. Duke, Linda, Peter, and Megan finally come together and compare notes. No longer in separate groups. There's only 4 left. Rich runs... Oh, no, there was still Rich, yeah. He runs into a spider woman who traps him in her web. She was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All the monsters are kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's just the story and the characters and the acting is stupid.
Mm-hmm. Duke and Peter go at it again, showing that they're better at choreographed fighting than acting. The big Grim Reaper statue in the room comes to life and finishes off Duke. Peter pushes the Grim Reaper off the balcony, and death explodes.
So that's all you need to do is to fight off death, is just live on the second floor.
Just push him off, yeah. Poof. As all of this is going on, the sneaky ghoul man lurks everywhere and watches everything. The group runs into the Carol Demon again, and she electrifies the group until they are about to pass out. Peter spots a vial in the dead mummy's hand and crawls for it. He throws it at her, and sparks fly. We don't really see them die, but we never see them again. So
all the characters are now dead.
All an assumption, but we never actually saw them die, and yeah, that's some bad editing.
We're done with these people now. Move on.
Yeah. Isabella, the bride, is still wandering around the tunnels. I know what I must do. Maybe I've always known. Cleon somehow catches up with her. They talk some more, and then she stabs him in the forehead with an ice pick.
Ow.
End of that marriage. And he's dead. We'll never see him again, right? Well, Isabel climbs out the upstairs window and works herself down a tree. All the dead people start crawling out of their graves. There's a really long chase with lots of crawling and clawing, but there are an awful lot of zombies to avoid. Isabella finally gets into the car with a man, and they drive away. And we cut back to that chained-up grave that pulses in the graveyard. Then she realizes the driver is the ghoul man. And then the grave opens up, and Cleon comes out, laughing uproariously. Game over.
All right, well, the acting here is atrocious all around. There's not one good actor in the bunch. The story is pretty basic and uncreative as well. The soundtrack is pure 80s, which is not so terrible. That was pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
The main reason to watch this one is for the creature effects, which are absolutely awesome. They put a lot of effort into the creatures. If only they'd put a little effort into some writing, they'd have been better off.
Writing and editing, and well, like you said, they had a mess of
there was a behind-the-scenes mess,
mishmash in producing and editing, and yeah.
Some of the creatures are costumes, some are stop motion, some are practical and puppetry effects, and most are actually pretty good. But for some reason, they decided to make those mud men constantly fart, which wasn't funny, it just made them silly. None of the other monsters were obvious comic relief, so it kind of made no sense.
Gas. Yeah, they were gassy monsters.
All right, and that is all the movies we're going to talk about this week. We've also got Werewolf from 1995, starring Jorge Rivera, Richard Lynch, and Federico Cavalli over on thehorrorbulletin.com for the bonus reviews. And Manhattan Baby, starring Christopher Connolly, Laura Lindsay, and Brigitte Backley over on the same place. And they were a mixed bag.
yeah, they were.
Yeah, the Werewolf was bad. The Manhattan Baby was at least entertaining.
It was, yeah.
Sort of a weird Egyptology curse thing.
Mm-hmm. But, yeah, it was good. Overall.
Somebody saw Raiders of the Lost Ark and decided to do their own version.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. All right, well, next week we will have 4 more horror movies and a short. Going to have what? Knock at the Cabin.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Uh-huh.
And a pretty cool short and all kinds of good stuff. That'll be next week.
Tune in to watch.
Yeah.
And listen with us.
I'm Brian.
And I'm Kevin.
And we'll see you next week.
See ya.